welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send us and really try to get to the heart of what they're saying.
Exactly, exploring the key insights.
And this time, it's a really interesting one. We have a YouTube transcript from Sergey, and it gets right into this big question. Is the world perfect? Or is it, fundamentally flawed?
And crucially, how does believing one way or the other actually affect us? Our well-being, our experience?
Yeah, because the source really highlights this tension. On one hand, you've got the common feeling, the observation, that things aren't perfect. There's illness, aging, death, social problems.
Well, the things we see every day. The source even mentions Gautama Buddha's observations here.
Right. But then there's this other perspective, a more metaphysical one, arguing that underneath it all, the structure might actually be perfect.
It's a fascinating contrast, and the source introduces this rather provocative term, vulgar Satanism.
Yeah, let's clarify that straight away. It sounds intense, but it's not talking about, actual devil worship or anything like that.
Yeah. No, not at all. It's used to describe this almost widespread belief, even among religious people sometimes, that the world's design is flawed, a fundamental dissatisfaction.
It definitely grabs your attention. It frames this belief as potentially, the source says, toxic.
And that's what we want to unpack today. Why toxic? And what's the proposed path toward, let's call it, detoxification?
Okay, so maybe start with acknowledging that feeling of imperfection is pretty valid from an everyday standpoint, isn't it?
Absolutely. You look around, you see social issues, personal suffering, mortality. It's very easy and maybe quite logical from that view to say, this isn't perfect.
These aren't just abstract thoughts. They hit close to home.
They do, but then the source brings in this counterargument. It talks about a creator.
But also other forces. It mentions the one with the letter Sa or Lu, a bit cryptic.
It is. The source uses a model, apparently drawing from a work called The Rose of the World, to make a distinction.
A distinction between what exactly?
Between the perfect principles of creation, the blueprint, if you will, and the results we see, which might be non-ideal or imperfect in certain areas, like, potentially are part of the universe.
Okay, so like a perfect recipe.
That might not turn out perfectly every single time due to other factors.
Exactly. The argument isn't that everything we experience is ideal, but that the underlying structure is perfectly organized.
It's a model for understanding, you said, not necessarily something to just believe outright.
Precisely. A framework.
So if the foundation is supposedly perfect, how does the source explain the non-ideal stuff we see? It brings in an anti-creator.
Yes, and the reason given for this anti-creator's dissatisfaction is, it's quite interesting.
What is it?
Apparently the complaint wasn't chaos. It was that the world wasn't rational enough, or maybe unreasonably structured, too much freedom, perhaps.
With freedom. How does freedom fit in?
The source suggests freedom is actually a core principle of the world's design. The idea is basically, do whatever you want, there are no restrictions.
But there's a catch. There is, however, a price to pay. Karma. That's the proposed mechanism. Absolute freedom, but within a system of consequences.
That resonates, actually. This idea of freedom, but not without accountability. It avoids pure determinism and pure chaos.
It does offer a middle ground, conceptually.
Okay, so why then is believing the world is imperfect considered, poisonous or toxic in this framework?
Because, according to the source, if you fundamentally believe the design is flawed, you get stuck. You're always pushing against it, trying to achieve some imagined perfection.
That the source claims is already there, just at a deeper level.
Exactly. And that constant striving against the fundamental nature of things, that becomes the poison. It generates dissatisfaction.
And this links back to that vulgar Satanism idea.
Yes, the idea being that this belief in imperfection leads to a kind of refusal to take a side for or against the creator because you fundamentally disagree with the setup.
The source mentions the master and Margarita here.
Right, and the idea presented there that cowardice may be understood here as the unwillingness to align with any perspective on creation. To just condemn it as flawed is a significant failing.
It's not about blindly accepting everything, but maybe acknowledging a potential underlying order.
That seems to be the implication. And the source goes further, suggesting that even within our apparently imperfect part of the world, there's still a perfect system operating.
Armageddon.
Karma. A system of self-regulation that minimizes negative consequences overall. Think of the butterfly effect idea.
Yeah, that intuitive sense that messing with complex systems can make things worse.
Right, there's an inherent interconnectedness. The source points towards diagnostics of karma for a deeper look at this self-regulating aspect, up to the fifth book specifically.
Okay, so if believing in imperfection is the toxin, what's the detox? How do you actually shift that perspective? It seems pretty deeply ingrained for many.
The core suggestion is to consciously try to abandon that idea, the idea that the world is fundamentally broken.
Easier said than done, maybe.
Perhaps, but the source offers a thought experiment. Ask yourself, how would you design a world interesting enough for an unlimited number of different creatures to live in indefinitely?
That's a big question.
It is. But then look around. The source implies our world already has a remarkable capacity for diversity and complexity, doesn't it?
It does make you think differently. Instead of just listing flaws, appreciate the sheer scale and intricacy.
Exactly. Maybe view conflicts and issues not as design flaws, but as interactions. Interactions between different forces or wills within this framework.
And it also mentions action.
Yes, definitely. It's not about passive acceptance of bad things. Take concrete action to improve things where you can. Don't just condemn.
But what about when you can't take direct action?
Then the suggestion leans towards finding some level of contentment or acceptance, maybe by shifting perspective to, like, longer timescales or the idea of multiple possibilities beyond just this one existence, considering the eternal versus the non-eternal.
Interesting. And then it brings in Eastern philosophy, specifically Osho.
Right, as a point of comparison or maybe contrast, it talks about this manic desire of Eastern sages to get rid of existence.
And links that to a different kind of Satanism.
Religious Satanism, the source calls it, which seems to mean a kind of outrage or deep offense that a creator would allow suffering, leading to this desire to escape the whole system.
So deep poisoning by the perceived imperfection.
That seems to be the interpretation offered, but then it contrasts this with Osho.
What's Osho's perspective, according to the source?
Absolute trust in existence, an acceptance of both being and non-being, birth and non-birth.
Implying a move beyond that toxic belief, a kind of deep acceptance of the underlying reality.
That's the suggestion, a transcendence of the outrage, perhaps, a trust in the fundamental order, whatever it may be.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. The main thrust of this deep dive, based on the source, is really challenging that common view of the world as inherently flawed.
Yes, it presents this alternative model.
Yeah.
Maybe the underlying structure is perfect, even if our experiences within it aren't always ideal.
And our dissatisfaction, our toxicity, might come from misunderstanding that fundamental structure.
That's the core argument presented. It's not about denying problems or suffering exist. That's crucial.
Right. It's not saying ignore reality.
No, it's about potentially changing the framework we use to understand those problems and that suffering.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to take away and mull over.
How might your own experience shift if you genuinely entertain this idea? The idea that the world's fundamental structure is perfect, despite all the apparent flaws and difficulties.
What might open up for you in terms of understanding or even in terms of how you act or react?
It's definitely something to think about. And of course, if this sparks interest, the source mentions several paths for deeper exploration.
The Rose of the World, Diagnostics of Karma, Ramana Maharshi, Castaneda, Osho. Lots to potentially dig into.
Indeed.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you a new, maybe challenging, but definitely intriguing perspective on your source material and perhaps on reality itself.